He acted like a brother to me, while acting like a lover to my wife. The low summer sun slanted through the kitchen window, turning the dust motes dancing in the air into tiny, glittering conspiracies. My wife, Elara, was bent over the open fridge, the gentle curve of her spine inviting a glance, which her brother-in-law, Kai, standing just a little too close, readily accepted. He was ostensibly reaching for a bottle of sparkling water on the top shelf, a completely innocent act, but his forearm brushed the soft skin of her bare shoulder, a fleeting contact that sent a silent, electric jolt through the room. Elara gasped, a small, involuntary sound that was instantly covered by a nervous, too bright laugh. She turned, her cheeks flushed, and their eyes locked, a moment of intense, breathless stillness where the ordinary sounds of the house dissolved. Kai didn't flinch, didn't apologize. Instead, he held her gaze, his own eyes darkening with an emotion that was certainly not brotherly respect. A tiny, almost imperceptible smirk played on the corner of his mouth, a silent challenge only she could understand. "Careful there, Kai," she managed, her voice a little shaky, a playful tone barely masking the sudden, rapid thump-thump of her own heart against her ribs. He leaned in just a fraction, the scent of his cologne, cedar and something sharp, almost dangerous, enveloping her. His voice, a low rumble, was meant only for her. "Wouldn't want to startle you." He didn't move away. He stayed close, too close, his gaze dropping momentarily to the pulse point fluttering wildly at the base of her throat before flicking back to her eyes, holding her captive in the charged silence. The air between them felt thick, heavy with unspoken desires, the unexpected closeness and undeniable physical weight. I had walked into the room unnoticed, standing in the doorway, my oblivious smile slowly freezing on my face as I watched this silent, intimate exchange. They broke apart then, quickly, Kai finally stepping back, the glass bottle in his hand, a bland, easygoing expression back in place. "Morning, mate," he said too casually, taking a long drink of water. Elara busied herself with the contents of the fridge, her back to me, the color still high on her neck. I noticed the tremor in her hand as she closed the door, a tremor that had nothing to do with the temperature. I brushed it off, trusting my brother, trusting my wife. But as I went to kiss Elara's cheek, I saw Kai watching us, his smile fading, replaced by a look of predatory possessiveness that chilled me to the bone. It was then I realized the brush of his arm wasn't an accident. It was a declaration. And it was just the beginning. I had invited him into my home, given him my trust, my friendship, my brotherhood, but he was taking something else. What happens when the lines of family, love, and loyalty are completely shattered by the one person you thought you could trust the most? The tremor in Elara's hand was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom of the fault lines running beneath the carefully curated surface of our marriage. For 3 years, our relationship had been a slow, beautiful erosion. We hadn't fought, not really, but the vibrant, immediate connection that defined our early days had settled into a comfortable, almost brother and sister routine. We communicated mostly in logistics: who was picking up groceries, what movie we should watch, rarely in desires. My own hidden truth was a quiet, suffocating fear of inadequacy. I ran a small, struggling architectural firm, always chasing the next contract, always feeling the pressure of providing. I convinced myself that my exhaustion and preoccupation were necessary sacrifices, failing to see that they were slowly starving the intimacy in my marriage. I loved Elara fiercely, but I loved the idea of our stable life more, and in protecting that stability, I had neglected the woman beside me. I often caught her staring out the window, a wistful, almost melancholic expression clouding her eyes, a look that asked a question I was too afraid to answer. Is this all there is? It was into this emotional vacuum that Kai had slipped effortlessly. He was the antithesis of my measured, anxious energy. He was spontaneous, effortlessly charming, and most importantly present. Just last night, while I was buried in blueprints, Elara had tried to reach out. She came into my study, not saying anything, just resting her head on my shoulder for a long moment. I remember inhaling the familiar scent of her hair, feeling a surge of affection. But the blueprints were due, and I'd given her a quick, distracted kiss on the forehead. "Just a few more minutes, babe," I'd murmured, my eyes already back on the drawing. She left without a word, the soft click of the door sounding like a final lock engaging. Later, I'd found her in the living room, a blanket around her shoulders, laughing a genuine, unrestrained laugh at something Kai had texted her. He wasn't even in the house, but his presence was a tangible thing. Today, after the unsettling kitchen exchange, I found them on the deck, supposedly discussing a broken garden hose. Kai was kneeling, his back to me, the sunlight highlighting the strong lines of his shoulders beneath his cotton shirt. Elara was squatting beside him, leaning in to hear him over the sound of the nearby traffic. "No, like this," Kai instructed, his large, capable hand gently covering Elara's smaller one as they worked the stubborn clamp. The gesture was fleeting and purely functional, yet the sight of their hands intertwined, however briefly, sent a tremor of real jealousy through me. Elara didn't pull away immediately. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, a flicker of something raw and undeniable passing between them, not just attraction, but a recognition of a shared, charged moment. "Oh," she whispered, her voice husky. Her laughter returned, this time softer, more breathy, than the one I had heard last night. "Okay, brother-in-law. You win this round." She pulled her hand away, but not before her fingers grazed the warm skin of his wrist. Kai stood up, towering over her, and his gaze lingered on her face as he gave me that easy, friendly nod when he finally noticed me. "Got it fixed, mate." "Good as new." The hose was fixed, but I knew, with a sick certainty, that the true leak in my life was only getting worse. I smiled, but the smile felt like a fragile dam holding back a flood. I didn't know what to fear more, the moment they finally crossed the line, or the crushing realization that they might already be halfway there. The escalating tension reached a fever pitch during the annual neighborhood bonfire party. I had to work late, assuring Elara and Kai, who had offered to help her set up, that I would arrive shortly. When I finally pulled up, the crackling fire cast dancing shadows across our lawn, illuminating a scene that instantly curdled the warmth in my stomach. Elara and Kai were standing near the woodpile, just outside the circle of light. She was wrapped in a thick wool cardigan, but the night was cool, and Kai was standing close behind her, his posture suggesting a protective shield rather than a casual proximity. As I watched, hidden by the shadows of my car, a gust of wind sent a shower of sparks into the air, and Elara shivered dramatically. Kai didn't say a word. He simply reached out and gently pulled the collar of her cardigan higher around her neck. It was a gesture of profound, gentle intimacy, something I hadn't done for my wife in months. His hands lingered on her shoulders, the warmth of his palms undoubtedly seeping through the fabric. Elara leaned back just slightly, resting her head against his chest for a fleeting moment, a gesture of absolute, unguarded trust. Her eyes fluttered shut, a hidden longing playing on her face that was agonizing to witness. When she opened them, she turned her head, and her gaze met Kai's. Their faces were inches apart, bathed in the seductive orange glow of the firelight. The air seemed to hum with the unspoken question hanging between them, a question that was dangerously close to being answered with a stolen kiss. My heart hammered against my ribs, a painful drumbeat of jealousy and recognition. That look, that breathless, potent exchange, was the kindling for the forbidden. I saw the temptation flash in Kai's eyes, a bold, confident claim, and the corresponding, terrified excitement in Elara's. They were two magnets fighting the magnetic field of my presence, and the attraction was winning. I stepped out of the car, slamming the door perhaps a little too loudly. The sound broke the spell. They sprang apart with the guilty haste of caught children, their expressions instantly smoothing into polite masks. "Hey, mate, there you are!" Kai said, his voice easy, but the suddenness of his smile felt strained. Elara turned to me, her face still slightly flushed from the fire, or was it something else? "You just missed the Esmore station opening," she chirped, a little too brightly. As I walked toward them, I noticed a piece of wood dust clinging to the side of Elara's hair, close to her ear. I reached out to brush it away, but Kai's hand was faster. He reached past me, his fingers grazing her cheek as he removed the speck. His movement was possessive, almost territorial. He looked at me over her shoulder, and for a split second, the mask was gone, replaced by a cold, triumphant challenge. He was acting like a brother in front of me, but he was communicating like a rival to her. The unspoken word hung heavy in the smoke, "She's mine." The air in the house had become suffocatingly small, saturated with unspoken tension. I was pretending not to see, and they were pretending not to act. The charade finally shattered the following Tuesday. I had told them both I was leaving town for a client meeting 3 hours away and wouldn't be back until late Wednesday. It was a lie. I couldn't shake the suspicion, the cold dread that had taken root since the bonfire. I needed proof, or I needed peace. I drove 10 miles out of the city, pulled over, and waited an hour before silently driving back. I parked my car 2 streets away and walked the rest of the distance, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. As I approached the house, the living room lights were off, but a soft glow emanated from the backyard deck. I crept through the side gate, the dry leaves crunching beneath my feet like accusations. They were there. Elara was wrapped in the same wool cardigan, sitting on the deck swing. Kai was sitting on the floor beside her, his back resting against the post of the swing, looking up at her. They weren't touching, yet they were closer than they had ever been. There was a wine bottle and 2 glasses, now nearly empty, resting on the small table. Elara was talking, her voice low and laced with a vulnerability I hadn't heard in years. I feel seen, Kai. Like you're the only one who still sees me." Kai reached up, not to touch her body, but to cup the back of her head, his fingers tangling lightly in her hair. It was a simple, tender gesture, yet devastating in its intimacy. "I do see you, Elara. I always have." His voice was a promise, a velvet temptation that bypassed my wife's ear and went straight to my heart. The swing moved slightly, and Elara's knees brushed his shoulder. She didn't pull back. The silence that followed was heavy with anticipation, the air thick with the unspoken desires that had been simmering for weeks. She leaned down, and Kai tilted his head up. They were inches from contact, their breath mingling in the cool night air. The emotional energy was electric, vibrating with the force of months of suppressed longing finally coming to a head. Then, Elara whispered something, a single word that barely reached my ears. "I can't." A flicker of anguish crossed Kai's face, quickly replaced by resolve. He didn't move away. Instead, he reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He pressed it into her hand, his eyes demanding she take it. Their fingers brushed, lingering for a beat longer than necessary. "Read this when you're alone," he murmured, his gaze intense. "And tell me you don't feel the same." Elara stared at the note, her hand trembling as she clutched the forbidden secret. I felt the sharp sting of betrayal, not from a physical act, but from the emotional chasm that had opened under my feet. The climax was no longer about a kiss, it was about the truth in that note. I felt my hand instinctively reach for my phone, ready to record, to document the undeniable proof. Just as I raised the device, a sudden movement in the shadows near the fence caught my eye. It wasn't me they should have been worried about. A figure stepped into the weak moonlight. It was my neighbor, Mr. Henderson, walking his dog, but his head was turned directly toward the deck. He paused, his expression unreadable as he stared at the intimate scene unfolding in my backyard. Did he see the note? Did he recognize the intensity? Was the secret about to be exposed to the entire neighborhood, and to me, in the most painful way possible? The sight of Mr. Henderson, the quiet observer of our suburban drama, snapped me out of my paralyzed state. Fear of public humiliation temporarily eclipsed my personal pain. I lowered my phone, slinking further back into the shadows as the neighbor continued his walk, eventually disappearing around the corner. The brief interruption had, however, done its job. Elara, startled by the dog's soft bark, had quickly tucked the note into the waistband of her pants, and Kai had pulled his hand away. The moment was gone, but the fire remained. My body was vibrating with silent rage, and the terrifying clarity of my next move. I was done with silence. I pushed the gate open, stepping into the light. "You look cozy," I said, my voice dangerously even, betraying none of the turmoil raging inside. They both jumped, their eyes wide with poorly concealed panic. Elara scrambled to her feet. "You're back early! We thought you were staying the night." Her hand instinctively went to the spot where the note was hidden. "My meeting was cancelled," I lied, walking toward them slowly. My gaze was fixed solely on Kai, who now stood tall, meeting my eyes with a challenging, unwavering stare that finally dropped the pretense of brotherhood. The attraction, the forbidden desire, was palpable, hanging between him and my wife like a tangible shroud. "Kai was just helping me unwind," Elara rushed to explain, her words tumbling out too fast. "Long day." "Oh, I can see that," I replied, reaching the small table between them. I picked up the near-empty wine bottle. "Pinot Noir. Your favorite, Elara." I looked at Kai. "Did you bring this, brother-in-law?" Kai folded his arms, the picture of defiant control. "Yes, I did." I thought she could use a distraction. "A distraction from what, Kai?" I asked, my voice rising. "From her husband? From her marriage?" The emotional dam broke. Elara stepped forward, tears welling in her eyes. "Don't do this, please." "Nothing happened." "Nothing physical?" "Maybe. But what about this?" I seized her by the arm, my grip tight, and pulled the folded paper from her waistband. It was slightly damp from her skin. My heart hammered with the finality of this moment. Kai moved instantly, a fierce, protective snarl on his face. "Don't touch her," he roared, lunging forward. I ignored him, my eyes scanning the handwritten script on the note. I expected a love confession, a plan to run away. What I read instead caused the blood to drain from my face, unleashing the true, shocking twist that made the betrayal 1,000 times worse. The note wasn't a love letter to Elara. It was a transfer receipt and a key. Asterisk. "Elara, I've been watching the accounts. He's sinking the firm and won't tell you. I transferred the seed money you inherited into this secure account. Use this key to the safe deposit box. Get out before he takes you down with him. I love you too much to see you lose everything. Kai." Asterisk. I looked up, stunned, my gaze flicking between Kai and Elara, whose face was now a mask of agonizing guilt. "I didn't know how to tell you," she choked out. "He wasn't acting like a lover. He was trying to save me from you." Kai stepped between us, his protectiveness unwavering. "The affair isn't between us, mate. It's between you and your investors. We found the fabricated numbers. We know you've been cooking the books." The world tilted. The betrayal wasn't about sex. It was about financial ruin, a hidden life I had built on lies, and the painful truth that my wife and my brother-in-law had formed a secret, intimate alliance, not of passion, but of mutual survival against me. "You're wrong," I stammered, scrambling for a defense. Kai simply held up his phone. The screen was open to a digital ledger, the numbers glaringly fake. "I'm not." And now she knows. Everything. The climax had arrived, not with a kiss, but with the cold, hard realization that I hadn't lost my wife to a rival's desire, but to my own devastating deception. I was the villain, and they were the co-conspirators of truth. The deck became an emotional battleground, illuminated by the harsh reality of the ledger on Kai's phone. My defense crumbled. The silence that followed Kai's accusation was louder than any shout, filled with the devastating echoes of my own deceit. "Elara," I whispered, reaching for her, but she flinched away, the movement a physical representation of the distance I had created. "Don't," she said, her voice raw, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "The lies, the stress, the late nights, it wasn't for the firm. It was to hide this. You jeopardized everything we built." She clutched a note, the key to her freedom, like a talisman. "All that pressure I felt from you, demanding perfection, demanding stability, it was all a fraud you were covering up. My carefully constructed world was in freefall." I turned on Kai, the old jealousy rekindled by his moral superiority. And you? You think you're the hero? Sneaking around, feeding her secrets? You used my trust, acted like my brother, just to get close to her and tear my life apart. Kai held his ground, his gaze hardening. I acted like a brother to her, which is more than you've done lately. I saw her suffocating in your fear. I gave her the truth when you only gave her stress. He stepped closer to Alara, his hand resting reassuringly on her shoulder, a gesture that was now openly protective, not subtle. I risked my job, my relationship with you, everything, because the alternative was watching her lose her future. You love her, I stated, the realization a painful, dull ache. It wasn't just about the money. The depth of his sacrifice confirmed the passion I had suspected all along. Kai looked at Alara, his eyes softened by a profound affection. Yes, he admitted, his voice quiet but firm. I do. I always have. He didn't look back at me, the confession a direct address to her. But I respected your marriage enough not to cross the line, even when I saw him destroying her. I gave her a path out, not a reason to cheat. Alara lifted her head, meeting my eyes with a chilling finality. This is it. I choose the truth. And right now, the truth is that I can't trust you, and I can't stay. She looked at Kai. The attraction I had seen weeks ago was still there, but now it was layered with gratitude, relief, and the terrifying prospect of a new beginning. Did you mean what you wrote? She asked Kai, her voice trembling. That you love me? More than anything, he replied, closing the physical distance between them, and this time, I was powerless to stop him. It was the romantic climax I had dreaded, not a clandestine hookup, but a raw, public confession of love, earned through loyalty and honesty. He reached up, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. Alara leaned into the touch, a silent surrender. The forbidden tension was finally resolving, not in a scandalous kiss, but in the bold, devastating decision to choose a new path. I watched them, the shattered fragments of my life glittering around their hopeful connection. I was alone, defeated not by an affair, but by the financial lies that had driven the woman I loved into the arms of the one person who saw her when I was too busy hiding. I'll sign the papers, I said, the words barely audible. I'll confess everything to the investors. Just please don't hate me. Alara nodded, her expression softening to pity. I don't hate you. I just don't know who you are anymore. She turned, taking Kai's hand. He squeezed it tightly, then gave me one last look, not of triumph, but of profound regret for the friendship that had been sacrificed. They walked away from the deck, toward the darkness of the yard, leaving me alone in the harsh, revealing glow of the house lights. 6 months later. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clear, albeit altered, landscape. The legal fallout was painful, but facing the truth had been a strange, brutal form of liberation for all of us. I had cooperated fully, starting the long process of rebuilding my life with integrity. Alara and Kai, however, didn't look back. They didn't start with grand, sweeping romance. They started with trust, building their relationship on the foundation of the shared crisis that had brought them together. Their first date wasn't dinner at a fancy restaurant, but organizing the contents of the safe deposit box, the key to their new, honest beginning. It was a cold, crisp December evening, and they were at their new apartment, small but flooded with light. The scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air. They were decorating their first Christmas tree together. Kai was struggling to untangle a stubborn strand of fairy lights, a frustration that was strangely endearing. Alara watched him, a genuine smile playing on her lips, the kind of unrestrained happiness I hadn't seen in her for years. She walked over to him, not with a burst of passion, but with a quiet certainty. She didn't try to take the lights. Instead, she wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against the solid expanse of his back. Still acting like the hero? She murmured against his shirt. Kai instantly relaxed under her touch, dropping the tangled wires. He turned in her embrace, his hands settling on her hips, pulling her close. The physical attraction that had once been forbidden tension was now a comforting, stable current between them. Only when untangling knots, he replied, his voice low and intimate. He looked down at her, his eyes warm, no longer holding back the profound affection he had hidden for so long. You saved me too, you know. Living with your husband's deception, it made me realize I couldn't live a lie either. Elara traced the line of his jaw with her thumb. We didn't just survive the storm, Kai. We built a lifeboat. He leaned in, and this time, the kiss was not stolen or rushed. It was deep, tender, and long, a moment of profound commitment. It was a kiss that sealed their bond, acknowledging the pain of the past while celebrating the absolute rightness of the present. When they finally broke apart, their foreheads were still touching. Kai reached up and gently moved a stray curl from her face. So, Kai whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Now that the secrets are gone, and we're starting fresh, will you still see me? Elara laughed, a light, joyful sound that echoed their freedom. I will always see you, Kai. You're not just my brother-in-law anymore. You're my truth. He smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that made her heart swell. He picked up a delicate glass ornament and hung it on a low branch. Then, he took her hand and led her to the couch, pulling her into his lap. As they sat there, watching the twinkling lights illuminate the room, Elara knew the suspense was over. The journey had been messy, fraught with deception and difficult choices, but the end result was a love built not on routine or comfortable lies, but on the brave, honest reality of what they felt for each other. The screen fades out on the image of their hands, intertwined and resting peacefully on her knee, finally at home. I hope this ending provided the satisfying romantic closure you were looking for. Would you like me to suggest some potential thumbnails or opening graphics for your YouTube video?